So now I've got my edge and I want to soften that. Actually, I want to blur it. So I'm going to go up to my select menu and I'm going to go to modify and I'm going to put a border on it and then I'm going to blur the edge. And that I think will help integrate it. So I'll go to the border and I would either choose 1 or 2 pixels. I'm going to leave it at 2. And just so you can see what happens. And you might be able to see that it has a border on there now, but I'm going to zoom in and you can see that border quite closely. And now that I've got a border selected, I'm going to go to the filter menu, go down to the blur, and I'm going to choose the Gaussian blur. And you should be able to kind of navigate, in this window to kind of see the effect that you're implementing. And if I zoom in there, you can all of a sudden see how blurred that gets, which is kind of nice. I don't want to do it too much or else it starts being weird. The default is 0.1, which isn't quite enough. So I just kind of want to, and I can keep zooming in here to see, what would be a good amount. And somewhere I would say around 1.5 up to maybe 2 might work. So I'm just going to back off a bit, maybe to 1.6. Okay, all right, and then do my Command or Control D, and there it feels a little more integrated, because it's blurred and it has that edge, which is kind of what bitmap graphics are made up of, kind of blurred edges that when you go out and look at them in 100%, they blend in and they create a nice finish. So I'm kind of happy with that. It's good. That's 200. Let's back out to 100. Oh yeah, see, it looks much better now. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to demonstrate is just working with the pen tool. And I'm going to create a new layer and call this red edit. And I'm going to grab the pen tool. I'm going to zoom in again. And sometimes, depending on how you're working, sometimes I can't. Usually you can kind of move around, but right now I can't because I'm in kind of a set mode. And if you go to your view, or actually window, if you go to your window menu, underneath workspace, actually underneath arrange, you've got these options that you can tile your image or your little artboard, or you can float in a window. So I'm going to choose float in a window. And you see how it pops up and it's got its own window in the Photoshop kind of interface. And then I can kind of expand it, and that gives me a little more flexibility. And if so right now it's a floating window, but if at some point I want to kind of embed it, then all I have to do is kind of move it up and let go, and there it is. So let me go back to my range floating window. Okay. So it's just about preference, and I kind of want to be able to zoom in and let me move this down a bit. And I should be able to move it over now a little bit. There we go. All right. Pen tool. I'm going to grab my pen tool and just create this little triangle shape. And you're just kind of laying down the points, because then I can always go back with my direct selection tool and edit that. So, and you guys are probably masters of the pen tool by now. And just kind of get a nice, kind of a nice selection. Okay, something like that. Now you're always going to have this kind of, color bleeding, especially because it's a highly lit, background. So again, you can kind of, work with. I find just working with blurring the edge sometimes helps kind of do that, kind of fix that. In fact, I think I can still get it a little snugger. So anyways, you can fiddle around with it, something like that. Okay, so I have my pen tool, and there it is right there. And I can now go up and kind of pick my colors. So if I go to my stroke, as you'll see with either in your swatches, your color swatches, or when you're working with the kind of drop down box, it does record the colors that you've been working with, right? If I wanted to create a new swatch that would be permanent, then I can do that in the following way. So I want to first choose my red color, and let me see here. Yeah, so I somehow lost my tools. I gotta go get my tools back. Oh, there. Getting rid of my history. I don't need that. Okay, there are my tools. So I'll get my eyedropper tool. I'm going to select red, and then in my little shape that I selected here under my red edit window. Sometimes you go away and then you come back and I can't seem to find my shape that I made with the pen tool. I can't edit it up here, and so sometimes you have to go either grab your pen tool or whatever you're working with. In that case, it's the pen tool. If you're working with shapes, then you have to go select your shape tool. But there all of a sudden it is. So that's good. So I've got my black line, but I want to turn it red, and I'm going down here, and I've got the red selected here, but I kind of want to make a swatch. So what you can do is create a new swatch, and it automatically picks the color that you have in your foreground color picker. So I'm just going to call it red, red edit, because I'm kind of using red to edit. So that's a good name for that. And I hit OK, and then it pops up down here. Okay. And we'll talk about, there's some really fun features of working with color. You can keep them in your library, and then you can open up your library in other documents. So anytime you create a new swatch, it kind of gets added to your colors. Okay. So I was working on a color theme, and I called it was for my Illustrator class. Actually, at one time I was making a color palette for layout, and it was on Japanism. So Japanism, actually, the French way of pronouncing it. Anyways, so that's like that's way back, So you can build colors in your library. Okay. Anyways, so I've got my red color selected, and now I want to kind of fill my shape. So I'm going to make sure this is selected, and hold on here. Yeah, get my pen tool selected here. Go grab that. Put my fill in there as well, and grab that. And all of a sudden, I've got my red in there. Okay. And the nice thing about working with your shapes is that you can always edit them. That's a real advantage. So if I decide that I want to kind of pull that out a bit, like there, that's a nice, quick little way to edit. So that's the advantage of using your shapes to edit, because then you can always go in and edit them. Whereas the first time when I was using the polygonal lasso tool, which was just a pixel selection, it's harder to edit. There's ways to, you know, work with it, but it's much more tedious than if you're just working with your pen tool or your shapes. So that's one advantage. I can easily change it or update it. Okay, so I've got my red color there. I'm going to go and play with the color thing here, the drop down, the blending mode. So I click and go through that, and kind of want to just get something reddish or warm. So I have to decide on one. I don't like any. Okay, how about that one? Yeah, so that's the colorize blending mode. And then I can work with, you know, backing off there a bit. And again, too, you can see this straight line isn't, you know, it looks weird. So again, I can work with, now I kind of know that that's a good shape. So I can work with softening that edge a bit. So perhaps I can, I know it's going to ask me to, you know, take away the shape. So what I could do is I could make a copy of it. If I thought I wanted to edit it again, I could make a copy of it and I can turn it off. And then I've always got one that I can go back and, you know, edit. As soon as I go to put a filter on this because I want to blur it, it's going to ask me to, you know, I have to rasterize it. And if I rasterize it, then I'm going to lose the ability to edit it. So that's why I made the backup. All right, so I've got that. And again, you should be able to see if I just scale up here in my little thumbnail view. You know, I kind of like it a little bit more blurred. So I'm going to just do that. And then I might even up the opacity a bit. You see that kind of starts looking good. All right. So that's all I'm going to do for this this video. Make sure as you're working to, you know, save as, and there's my color edit PSD, and I will save that. And remember, you know, when you're working in your Photoshop format, you have, you know, the default is to save layers, and you always want to make sure that's a default, so you would never not save your layers, right? And then it does embed also a color profile, which is not so important for us right now. But color profiles become more important when you're working with print documents. And if you were going to some kind of a printing service, you might talk with the service person and they might say, you know, use a certain color profile, and then they would tell you which ones, and you would, you know, you could set up in Photoshop. Okay, so we're just going to save that and click on OK. And those are your two techniques, okay?